Hey everybody, how's it going? So today I wanted to share this article on Canadian real estate. It seems like they're having a lot of the same problems that we are, so I just thought I'd read this for you and give you some thoughts. It says the second largest country in the world is running out of land. The Canadian dream of a house with a yard is becoming unaffordable as real estate prices surge and space to build runs short. I think that some Canadians may mildly disagree with this when they say that it's becoming unaffordable as opposed to has been for quite a while. So it says Canada's housing market is running hotter than just about anywhere else in the world. But despite the anxiety about irrational bidding wars and fears of the bubble bursting, what's fundamentally driving it is a worsening imbalance between supply and demand. Buyers want large homes, but increasingly can't have them because there isn't enough space in and around the major cities where people work. One thing I'm kind of curious about there is the issue that there isn't enough space, or is the issue that there is space, but the apartments that are there are either A, vacant because they're asking too much money, or B, not being built due to issues and zoning restrictions with the local government. I don't live in Canada, but that's just the first question that I kind of have there. It says the world's second biggest country by landmass is effectively running out of space, and that has Canada on course for a reckoning. The dream of a detached home and a piece of land, which generations of Canadians have taken for granted, and which continues to entice new immigrants, may soon be out of reach in the places where people want to live. That could force an expansion of the idea of home to include condos and rentals, potentially transforming how the middle class does everything from raising families to saving for retirement. I don't know. There's a difference between having a home and an apartment or a condo. Running out of land in Canada is a relatively recent phenomenon compared to Europe, Japan, or other parts of the world, said Robert Hogue, an economist at the Royal Bank of Canada. I think that for future generations, home ownership is going to look a lot more European, for example, than it does today. I don't know why that sounds like a pejorative, but for some reason it does. Like I know it probably didn't mean that way, but like they're talking about how you should expect less. You used to be able to get a house, and now for the same price, you're going to get an apartment where you share walls with someone else, and instead of just calling it what it is, they just called it European. That's just, I don't know. It's interesting how they've managed to phrase that as seemingly as a pejorative. In Canada, buying a home has long been seen as the surest path to middle-class security. Canadians, on average, live in some of the biggest houses in the world and post higher rates of home ownership than in the UK, France, or even the US. The pandemic has put an even bigger premium on backyards and extra space. Nearly 60% of home sales last year in the 18 communities in and around Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Ottawa were for single-family detached houses, according to data compiled from local real estate boards by Bloomberg News. Only about a quarter of the sales in these places were for apartments. But when you look at what has been built in these same cities and their nearby bedroom communities over the last decade, the percentages are exactly reversed. 60% of new housing stock is apartments, and is 25% detached houses, according to government data compiled by Bloomberg. That mismatch has forced desperate bidders to vie for an increasingly constrained supply of single-family homes. In 2020, Canada's benchmark home prices gained almost 50%, while with only Luxembourg posting a bigger increase, according to data from the Dallas Fed. Still, developers don't seem to be responding. Though construction started on a record number of new homes in Canada's metro areas in March, the percentage that were single-family detached actually fell to 19% from 24% in the previous year, according to government data. While this ratio improved in April, new home starts slowed that month overall. If there's a problem, it's in the composition of the new supply, said Robert Kavkik, an economist with the Bank of Montreal. We don't build single detached homes anymore, and it just so happens from a demographic perspective that's what the market demands, so we're kind of stuck on that front. Yeah, that's what the market demands. And it really is one of those things where I keep reading about how people, a smaller apartment, smaller living areas, smaller condos, it's more efficient, it's more eco-friendly, it's more this, it's more that. That's what people want. I don't believe that that's what people want. I think that's what people are buying because the prices of the thing that they actually want continue to go up and up and up. I personally refuse to believe that a majority of people were, like, who wants a backyard where you could sit on a sunny day? Who wants a front yard? Why would you want to have a side of your house where you could have people over and enjoy the outdoors when you can have just the stone of the building next to you for the same price? It says it comes down to land. While Canada boasts a total area of about 10 million square kilometers, roughly 40 times the area of the UK, most Canadians are clustered in a handful of major cities not far from the U.S. border. That's where the jobs are. And while the work-from-home era has expanded that radius for some, turning quiet farming communities and weekend getaway spots into the hottest real estate markets in the country, the possibility of returning to the office even a few days a week has kept most workers from striking too far afield. City-specific factors have constrained land use even more. Vancouver is squeezed between the Pacific Ocean and the mountains. Provincial regulations against urban sprawl have effectively turned Toronto and Ottawa into islands. for the purposes of development, and Montreal actually is an island. So I am kind of curious how much the zoning laws and regulations are contributing to the fact that this stuff isn't being built. If we think of first-time home buyers, a young couple starting out, it's much more realistic for them to be considering a condo apartment as a starter home from an affordability standpoint, says Royal Bank of Canada's Hogue. This is the norm for large global cities. I'm hard-pressed to think of any major global city where a single detached home near the core urban area is affordable. And it's really weird because, like, when I just think back to my parents, my dad did not make my parents did not make a lot of money, and they had granted it was a trip. It was a trek to get over to Manhattan, but it wasn't a horrible trek, and that area was actually affordable. And now you look at it now, and it's not. And this idea that everybody should get in a condo or an apartment, I think something that a lot of people are just missing out on, just the basic little luxuries of just having your own house. Like, let's say you just decide to play music because it's the end of a busy day, and you just want to be able to enjoy yourself. It's like, why?
It's too loud.
Stop that! Shoot! Ow! Damn! But it's annoying if you've ever had someone who takes their broom and starts banging it on the ceiling because you're playing your music at a standard volume and they're just not happy unless it's silent all the time. That's one of the cool things about actually having a house. And it's one thing if the apartment is way cheaper than the house and you're making that trade-off, but it's another if, you expected a house to be $600,000 and now when you're finally ready to buy, an apartment is $600,000. It's smaller. It has less amenities. It's the same amount of money, but you should just be okay with it. Canada is going to need more apartments too, especially as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau moves to boost immigration historic records to make up for the pandemic lull. The country has a shortage of homes generally, posting the lowest number of housing units per 1,000 people among group of 7 countries, according to a recent report from Bank of Nova Scotia. And again, if you want to take in more people, by all means, go ahead and take in more people. Just make sure you're making the homes for them so that you don't wind up pricing out the residents, so that you don't give the residents a reason or incentive structure to be hostile towards the newcomers to your country. That pressure means the slack that's appeared in urban condo and rental markets over the last year is expected to be short-lived, going a long way to explaining developers' focus on density rather than land constraints. The main obstacle to building more apartments in Canada's cities is local zoning regulations. Aha. But even if more apartments get built, Canadians will have to get used to living in them. I'm going to butcher that name. I am so sorry. Julia Zaccagnini, a 42-year-old massage therapist, has always lived in apartments from her childhood in the suburbs of Paris to France to her time in Montreal after immigrating to Canada. But when the pandemic made remote work possible, she and her husband bought a detached property in a town about an hour outside the city to raise their 3 kids. Still, with home prices forecast to keep rising, future Canadians may have an experience much like what Zaccagnini members of Paris. I didn't know anyone who was living in a house, she said. That was for really rich people, I suppose. I guess it depends on where you are. Again, if you're in a really densely populated city, maybe living in a house actually is something that requires you to be rich. Or, maybe some jobs may not require you live in a city. And, you decide that, hey, I'd actually like the ability to come home and play music without some angry person, trying to hit me with their broom because they share a wall with me. I'm just kind of curious what you all think of this. And the housing prices really do seem to, it's not just in cities that they're going insane. It seems to be even in more remote areas. I get more and more comments every day. I did a video on Montana where people were talking about how even in, rural areas of Montana, how the housing prices were exploding. And the interesting thing is you have builders that want to build, but they are not building because of insane lumber and steel prices that are going through the roof. So they're afraid of building something that where the price is going to continue going up and up and up. So there are a lot of these contractors for people who are building houses where they have clauses in it where it says if the price of materials goes up, we are allowed to pass this cost on to you, the customer, asking us to build a house. That's going to cause a lot of friction in building new homes. This seems like a mess. It really, honestly, this doesn't seem like a Canada-centric problem at all. This seems like a North America, if not eventually, at the very least, a North America problem, and eventually probably a world problem. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm still one of those people where my goal is not, again, if I'm going to buy something, and again, this may be me sounding spoiled or ridiculous or greedy, but if I were to purchase something, if I were to actually, spend my life savings or put myself into a gigantic amount of debt so that I can own where I live, I really don't want my neighbor to say hey, why are you walking back and forth at 1 a.m.? I can hear that. Stop that. That's one of the things you deal with as a renter, that as an owner, I would just want that to be in the rearview mirror. Let me know what you think in the comments down below.